And greetings, viewers around the world. Well, a lot of people are extremely upset and angry and depressed that Madam President isn't going to happen, that the United States isn't going to have Hillary Clinton as President of the United States, and that this hopeful vision of her in the White House with a Republican Congress and perpetual gridlock and nothing ever getting done and essentially a hopeless future, that isn't going to happen. And so a lot of people are extremely upset about that. Say, how do you know that Republicans would have kept control of the House and Senate? Well, actually, control of the House and Senate was called long before the presidential race was ever called on election night. And in the final days especially, nobody seriously believed that Democrats were going to capture the House of Representatives. That just wasn't in the cards. I've said all along that it wasn't in the cards, especially since Hillary was nominated. And not only did they not gain many seats in the House, but the outcome was actually far worse than they expected. So nobody in their right mind actually thought that Democrats were going to control the House of Representatives. What would that have meant? It would have meant perpetual gridlock and nothing getting done, same as has happened during the last 6 years of Obama's presidency. Remember, the Republican Party captured the House in the 2010 election. It was a response to a massive wave of resentment against Obamacare. And the exit polls that day revealed a wave of election, and it appeared that the driving force was that so many people were simply angry at Obamacare. So Obama has these big accomplishments during the first 2 years, the stimulus, Obamacare, and a few others. But then once the Republicans get control of the House in the 2010 election, largely led by the Tea Party, it was the Tea Party that was the driving force in the 2010 election. So January 2011 comes along and Republicans get control of the House. And virtually all legislative accomplishments of even worth any mentioning stop. Obama then does things mostly by executive order, but big programs no longer get through Congress. Big changes, big laws don't get through Congress anymore. And some people held on to the notion that Hillary Clinton would somehow be able to work with Republicans. Well, actually, that was Obama's big mistake. He thought he was going to work with Republicans on health care, and he reached out to Republicans, and they ended up presenting a united front against Obamacare. So you had then this major piece of legislation that was passed with Democratic votes only. And it was already moving this direction, but that sort of heralded this period of time in which bipartisanship was essentially dead. Now, Hillary Clinton made statements that she would get things done by schmoozing, that she would invite people to the White House, that she would socialize with people in the White House, that she would chat people up, that she would behave in sort of this extroverted fashion as Bill Clinton was known to do. But what people fail to realize is that the people who attained this majority in the 2010 election were largely ideologically driven. They were elected because they were against government, and their primary motive was to short-circuit Obama's presidency. And he did get some things done through executive orders, but they were successful in stopping most legislation, and that's what they were committed to do. That's what they were elected for. So had Hillary been elected, you would have had this perpetual gridlock, nothing getting done, one party in control of the House, the other party in control of the White House, and quite possibly the Republicans would have controlled the Senate under that scenario as well. Now, people like to say, well, wouldn't she be able to triangulate like Bill Clinton supposedly did when the same thing happened to him when congressional Republicans were in the majority during Clinton's administration? Well, what happened during the Clinton administration wasn't so much triangulation as it was capitulating to the Republican agenda. He largely, in some respects you might say, became a Republican. And so you had NAFTA that got passed, and you had welfare reform that got passed. And one of the most devastating things that he actually did was sign the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which was a very important piece of economic regulation that was passed during the New Deal. And that deregulated a lot of the relationships between banks and insurance companies. Insurance companies were now sort of allowed to get into the banking business, and banks were now allowed to get into the insurance business. And I remember thinking in years past, well, what's so bad about that? Why can't banks do insurance? Why can't insurers be involved with the banks. That didn't seem like such a bad thing to me, although it was apparently pretty bad in the eyes of Franklin D. Roosevelt and people in his administration and Congress at that time, who actually were able to get rid of that situation and prohibit banks and insurance companies from doing business together. So Bill Clinton signed that law, and it was a big step toward deregulation, and as he said, the era of big government was over. And, who are the people who've been fighting against big government so much? Well, it's been the Republican Party. So Bill Clinton kind of joined in with those folks. And what you got in the last 6 years of Bill Clinton's administration was essentially a Republican agenda in many respects. And people fail to realize that the same thing would have happened with Hillary. The big proposals, the big plans that she touted on the campaign trail would never have come to pass because of the simple fact that the Republican House would not pass her agenda. So what would we be left with? More than likely some crappy trade deals. I think it's very possible that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that awful, truly awful piece of legislation, might have gotten through. And international free trade, I know a lot of people say that free trade has been good for the U.S. economy, but it certainly hasn't been good on the job fronts. Even some of the most ardent supporters of free trade admit that job growth from international free trade has not been a good thing. Even if some other good things have happened in terms of making products available, job growth has not been good. And so you have to wonder, in that respect, how has the economy benefited from free trade? Because obviously you need good jobs in your society, or at least people used to believe that you needed good jobs in society, and free trade on the jobs front has not benefited Americans all that much. Then you have the whole situation with her trustworthiness, this email situation, and does that really matter if she used a private server to communicate classified information? Is that really important? A lot of people seem to think that it wasn't important, but was it really? Well, there was a situation that existed in the Bush administration in the days leading up to the Iraq War. And following September 11, 2001, there were various strategies discussed as far as how to respond to the terrorist attacks in New York City and on the Pentagon. And an internal memo surfaced that one response would be to hit Iraq hard. And so not only did the Bush administration send troops into Afghanistan, but they also apparently began looking for a reason to attack Iraq because Iraq was a convenient enemy. And Saddam Hussein obviously had done a lot of horrible things over the years, and he was just a very convenient enemy. And so the Bush administration assigned Ambassador Joe Wilson to go investigate and attempt to basically gin up evidence to see if there was evidence to support a U.S. invasion of Iraq. Now the problem was that Ambassador Wilson's report was not favorable at all, and it did not please people in the Bush administration. So what did they do? Well, Wilson's wife, a lady named Valerie Plame, was a covert operative for the Central Intelligence Agency. And in an apparent effort to get back at Wilson, people in the Bush administration outed Valerie Plame. They made it known that she was a secret covert agent, and they effectively destroyed her career. Because once someone's been identified as a secret agent, they can't function in covert operations anymore. So Valerie Plame's career was destroyed because of this report of her husband, Joe Wilson. So what, they did was expose her as a covert agent. Now that's the danger in using a private email server to communicate classified information. The fact that you can expose intelligence agents operating all over the world, and people can die as a result. And not only that, you run the risk of communicating information to people who might possibly plot a terrorist attack on the United States. That's just how serious that was. And the FBI director, James Comey, in spite of the fact that he did not choose to pursue any criminal actions against Hillary Clinton, Comey said that Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server demonstrated very bad judgment, that it was very irresponsible. And I think even to this day, in the hubbub after the election, people do not understand the kind of damage that could have been done by this communication of classified information. You know, if she was willing to do that as Secretary of State, might she have done the same thing as President? And what kind of danger would that have brought upon U.S. intelligence agents? And could it have resulted in another terrorist attack? I think it could have. You know, they say loose lips sink ships. That's a saying that goes back either to the First or Second World War. I don't remember which one, but loose lips sink ships. And so the wrong information in the wrong hands can do incredible damage. Then you have this fact that Hillary Clinton, she was described by William Safire, late columnist, as a congenital liar. And you saw that in the campaign. Clinton said that Donald Trump could not be trusted with the nuclear codes, and what she was suggesting was that the president alone can order a nuclear strike. And that is not true. You need the cooperation of at least one other person, who would normally be the Secretary of Defense. So you don't have a president that can take this unilateral action to launch nuclear weapons. It doesn't work that way. And I recorded a video on that very subject not too long ago. And so you do have this air of dishonesty. Then you have all the money that was made through the Clinton Foundation. And she sort of dodged questions on that as far as what was happening with the money and was there pay to play and all that kind of crookedness. Reminds me of a scandal that happened with game shows in the 1950s, pay to play, where all kinds of illicit dealings were going on and the FCC stepped in and I think some people got prosecuted and so forth. So you have this extremely bad judgment and you have all the dealings of the Clinton Foundation. Then did you see during the debates, Donald Trump basically came out and said, accused her of inciting violence at his rallies. And did you see the discomfiture on her face? She didn't want to go there. I think it's pretty obvious that she was behind some of this violence, but she didn't want to admit it. And then there's this issue of how Hillary treats people. It's been widely known for a very long time that she regards, and apparently Bill does too, other people as beneath them, that there is a double standard. And she has a reputation for throwing these massive temper tantrums and treating people horribly. She's been known, people who served as bodyguards and so forth, they would say good morning and she would walk by and give them the obscene gesture and say F you. And she made it very plain that she could not stand people that she believed to be beneath her. And you have to wonder, did she really want to do anything for the American people? Did she care that Republicans would have been in the House, or was it just all about Hillary and the Clintons? If she despises people that much, and she actually made statements suggesting that she did not like ordinary Americans, that she and Bill didn't consider themselves to be ordinary Americans. So can a person like that be trusted to act on behalf of ordinary Americans? I think the way people treat people is an indication of character. And I think that people in the highest offices need to demonstrate character. And are there issues with Trump? Yes, there are. But there are also serious issues with Clinton. And when you compare the two, it sounds like Trump actually treats people better on an individual basis than Clinton does. And that might be an indication of superior character. So this walking above the clouds, we're up above everybody else, we're the kings, we're the royalty, and everybody's our servants, that came across during the campaign, and it hurt her tremendously. How people treat people is an indication of character, and there's abundance of evidence to suggest that her character is a very bad thing. And so those are just a few of the reasons that people could not stand the thought of Hillary Clinton in the White House and would not vote for her. The Democratic Party would have been much better off with Bernie Sanders, who was a thoroughly likable guy, an honest guy, never involved in any corruption, and whose policies were supported by the vast majority of the people according to polling data. But the Democrats chose not to go that way, and they presented a thoroughly defective candidate who was very defective and unsuitable for the White House in many ways. And this aura of unfitness went a long way to doing Madam President the one who wanted to be Madam President, it did a lot toward ending her career. And so there, in brief, you have a few reasons why Hillary lost the presidential election. Thank you, and have a good day.